to a Hope 1032 podcast. The Hope Book Club with Katrina Roe and Natasha Moore, because life's just better with a book.
Hello and welcome to the Hope Book Club. I'm Katrina Roe. Today I'm joined by Natasha Moore from the Centre for Public Christianity and Katrina Clifford from Robert Menzies College at Macquarie University in our first episode for 2022. We're reading some non-fiction to help us get it all together. Natasha Moore has been reading The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer. This book sees hurry as the greatest enemy of a healthy spiritual life and argues in favour of a slower, simpler way of life. Katrina Clifford has been reading Decluttering at the Speed of Life by Dana K. White. This is a decluttering guide for those whose busy lives are less than perfect. If being tidy does not come naturally to you, this book can help. I'm hoping that she's going to lend it to me next, actually. And I've been reading Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Peter Scezzaro, a book about dealing with your emotional baggage and living in a way that is in tune with your emotions so you can be authentic in your faith. First, let's hear from The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer.
In a way, I'm the worst person to write about hurry. I'm the guy angling at the stoplight for the lane with 2 cars instead of 3. The guy bragging about being the first to the office, last to go home. The fast-walking, fast-talking, chronic multitasking speed addict. To clarify, not that kind of speed addict. Or at least I was. Not anymore. I found an off-ramp from that life, so maybe I'm the best person to write a book on hurry. You decide. I don't know your story. The odds are you aren't a former megachurch pastor who burned out and had a midlife crisis at age 33. It's more likely that you're a college student at USD, or 20-something urbanite in Chicago, or a full-time mum in Melbourne, or a middle-aged insurance broker in Minnesota, getting started in life, or just trying to keep going. The Korean-born German philosopher Byung-Chul Han ends his book, The Burnout Society, with a haunting observation of most people in the Western world. They are too alive to die and too dead to live. That was me to the proverbial T. Is it you? Even a little?
If your spiritual life is flagging, the answer isn't to throw yourself into doing more. While our culture applauds busyness and strives for success, John Mark Comer believes that slowing down is key to emotional and spiritual growth. His book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, How to Stay Emotionally Healthy and Spiritually Alive in the Chaos of the Modern World, calls on people of faith to slow down in order to focus more on our inner lives. Natasha Moore from the Centre of Public Christianity has been reading this one. Hi, Natasha.
Hey, Katrina.
So what brought this book across your desk?
Well, people have been talking about this book in kind of my circles for a few years. I would have said like 5 years, but actually it was only published in 2019. So clearly that just reflects how much people have been talking about it. Like busyness is the curse of our time and so on. Yeah, everyone feels like they're too busy. Finally, somebody lent me this book. That was about a year ago. And then it was during lockdown last year that I found that I suddenly had more margin, nowhere to be, nowhere to go, nobody to see, and, living on my own, not having kids at home as many people did who did not find that lockdown gave them more margin. But for me, that was the point where it was kind of optimal to read this book, partly because I had the time and space to do it and to think about it, and partly because, I was finding that having margin and being home more and all that kind of thing was quite helpful in spite of all the ups and downs of lockdown. And so it was, a really good moment to think through, well, how do I order my life and my days? And is it kind of the best way for my emotional and spiritual health?
Yeah, so that's how you came to this, I guess, idea. But how did John Mark Comer get to the point where he felt that slowing down was really the missing link in his spiritual life?
Well, he tells the story of, he's this pastor and author in Portland, Oregon, a very kind of cool, hipster, progressive city. He was leading this church, like kind of a mega church, I guess. So he was kind of preaching 7 times on Sunday or whatever and struggling to spend time with his family, and everything was growing really quickly. And he just found himself kind of spinning out of control in terms of time and energy and taking care of himself physically and all that kind of thing. And was like, this is not sustainable. This is not what life is meant to look like. And so he decided to step away from it all. He didn't kind of leave and go off to a cottage in the woods or anything, but kind of scaled back. Was like, I'm going to hand over loads of responsibilities here and just have kind of a normal job within the church. And so he wrote this book kind of several years down the track, being like, this is how our life has changed dramatically as a family because of these practices that we decided to kind of dive into as a family. And he talks about these things. He kind of lists them as, I think he describes 4 of them: silence and solitude, Sabbath, simplicity, and slowing.
Yeah, right. And so how does he sort of mount his case? Is it a lot of stories from his own life? Is it a mix of kind of case studies and other things?
Yeah, it's a whole mix of stuff. So he talks about his own story. He has like a whole bunch of really excellent quotes, I got to say. Like in some places, the book is just kind of, he curates all these brilliant quotes from different thinkers and articles and stuff, which, I always appreciate. There was one that was like, I wrote this one down: if you go against the grain of the universe, you get splinters. Which is, the way that we live a lot of our lives. So his diagnosis of the problem, like this, obviously this guy, he's a pastor, he's a Christian. He thinks that you can learn a lot from Jesus about, the way that we should be living our lives as limited creatures. But his diagnosis of the problem is very much like an everyone diagnosis. He describes the modern life of most people, our addiction to technology, and how kind of irritable and restless and stressed we get, and all these different things where you're like, oh, yeah, you're right, that's me. So I think whether you're a Christian person or not, you will find something in this book that's like, oh, yes, that resonates with me. So his answers, like his solutions to the problem, are very strongly drawing on, what he believes as a Christian. But I really think there's something in there for everyone if you're kind of wanting to think through these things. How do you order your life and your days? And how's that working out for you?
Yeah. And so was it something you enjoyed reading, or was it more something that you pushed through as discipline?
It's a very easy read. Like it's to the extent that I'm someone who likes to read a lot, and probably people who are listening to the podcast especially are people who like to read. This book is one of those books where he's like bent over backwards to make this book accessible to people who don't really like reading books. So like the font is quite large. There's lots of space. There's lots of like different formatting and kind of short chapters and all these things that make it really easy. Lots of stories. So it's an incredibly kind of easy read. Sometimes I'm a bit like, it's okay, you can talk about the philosopher without having to apologize for like how complicated that is. But he's a really engaging writer, and everything he says is kind of, okay, I want to chew on this for a while. There's a workbook that he puts online for free that you can go and look at the end, because he's like, I really genuinely want some of this stuff to work for you, and I don't want you to just read it and then put it down and forget about it.
Yeah, so I think the title, The Ruthless Elimination, suggests that we have to be pretty determined to actually succeed at slowing things down. And are you convinced of the need for this sort of single-minded ruthlessness? And have you been able to make that happen in your own life, Natasha?
He definitely convinced me, and I was ripe to be convinced, right? Because of the whole circumstance of being like, oh, when I stop doing so many things, actually a lot of things become better. I enjoy things so much more. I'm so much more able to connect with other people and not find, life burdensome in a whole bunch of ways. So, we want to be able to discharge our responsibilities and like enjoy the good things in life. Like, surely we all want that. So he definitely convinced me of that. I think that putting it into practice is a slower and patchier thing. I do find, he talks about how if you think about like all the times that you're angry or irritable or frustrated, that so often they're times when you're in a hurry, when you feel like there isn't enough time, that, if you think about love and peace and joy, these things that I'm sure we all would like our lives to be marked by, those things are incompatible with hurrying, with kind of rushing around all the time. They just, they don't feature. So, he quotes Carl Jung, the famous psychologist, who said that hurry is not of the devil, hurry is the devil.
Look, I really relate to this. I mean, it is strong words, but I've noticed this in my own life. Something I've clocked, I think over the last 18 months is that anytime I get irritable, anytime I get, snappy with my kids, it's always when there's a time pressure. And it's usually a time pressure that either we didn't need to have, or that if I was just more organised, that I wouldn't be snapping, whether it's getting them to bed or getting them out the door. So
yeah, and we would prefer not to live our lives that way where possible.
Totally. All right. Well, thank you so much for that review, Natasha. Does anyone else get an irresistible urge to tidy up at the start of the year? I know I do. And Katrina Clifford evidently feels the same because she has been reading Decluttering at the Speed of Life by Dana K. White. This is a decluttering guide that acknowledges the reality of living with a constantly growing family and looks at how to keep decluttering in your everyday life. Katrina Clifford has been reading this one. Hey, Katrina.
Hey, Katrina.
How's looking after reading this book? Is it all under control now, Katrina?
Look, I'd say it's probably a work in progress. It's not as good as it could be, but it certainly has been worse. So the book is certainly helping me get things under control.
Well, that's good. Well, what I like about the premise of this book is that understanding that, life happens, the family grows and changes, new stuff is always coming in. You've got to save stuff for the other kid that's growing up. Did you feel this was a bit more of a realistic decluttering book?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's two reasons for that. The first one is Dana K. White, the author, is not kind of a natural organizational guru. She is self-described as a slob who cannot keep her house under control, is terrible at decluttering, and so has had to really work hard at learning how to do this. And that means that the sort of strategies that it comes up with, she talks about them as decluttering strategies for real people in real life, rather than someone who has, been organizing their stuff since the age of 3 and just loves putting things in the right place and tidying up. So I think that works really well. Kind of her personal honesty and her personal experience, as well as her personality, is her situation. She's got a growing family. She's got teenagers. She's got other work that she does. She's got parents and parents-in-law to look after. She's got a busy and full life, and she can't spend all her time just cleaning and decluttering her house. And so the sorts of strategies that she's worked out, the sort of strategies she talks about in the book, are strategies that work in that sort of context, where you can't just take a week to declutter your entire house, where you might only have 5 minutes here or half an hour there. And how can you make the most of that time, even if you don't have a tidying sort of personality, to actually make some progress on your house?
I like the sound of this because often self-help books, or particularly the how-to ones, they can be almost a bit elitist. They can make you feel like there's something wrong with you, if you haven't really got it all together yet. And so it sounds like this is a book you can read without feeling inadequate. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. I did not feel judged at all when reading this book. And I think often that's how I feel, like it's I should be a better person than this. I have to read this book because I'm not good enough. Dana is very clear that she is the worst at all of this. And she tells lots of stories throughout the book of how she worked out these processes because things were completely out of control, or times when she has failed completely and needed to go back to scratch. Even just, here's a principle and here's an example of how I put it into practice. And all the examples are really extreme because she's a really big person with a big personality and lots of stuff. And so I can kind of read it and go, like my problems are not that big. She's gotten herself under control. I can get myself under control as well. So she very much comes across as very genuine. She's a person of integrity. She's very compassionate. She talks a lot about being compassionate to yourself and self-understanding, and doing what you can when you can.
Yeah.
So it's very comforting and encouraging in that way.
So what will you be doing differently in 2022 as a result of reading this book, Katrina?
So one of the things I love about this book, the idea of decluttering at the speed of life, is this idea that life happens, whether we want it to or not. So I have a young baby, and, she will sleep for a while and then she'll wake up. And when she wakes up, she needs attention. So I can't, pull everything out of my pantry in order to sort it out, because chances are 5 minutes later, the baby's going to wake up and then I've just got stuff everywhere. So one of Dana's key principles is don't pull everything out of a space. Take things out one at a time and work out what to do with them. If it belongs in the space, you put it back. If it doesn't belong in the space, you either throw it out or you take it to where it belongs. Which means that if you've only got 5 minutes, maybe you only deal with 5 things, but those 5 things are dealt with and they're done. So the next 5 minutes you have, you come back, you're not starting from scratch again. You're starting from a place that's maybe only a little bit further on than the previous starting point, but it's a little bit further on. So I've been practicing that already. I've been practicing it on my kitchen bench. I've got a couple of minutes, a whole lot of stuff on my kitchen bench, but I can put 3 things away while I've got this particular moment of time here. And it makes a difference slowly, but it makes a difference. It makes me feel like I'm getting somewhere. So that's going to be my big principle for the year.
Well, that is good. I know that sometimes books that are about kind of method, process, etc., can get a bit tedious, but was this interesting enough to hold your attention?
Yeah, it really was. I actually read this in about 36 hours, just kind of start to finish. She writes really nicely, and it feels like you're kind of listening to a friend chattering away about their life and what they've learnt. But the book's also designed kind of room by room and area by area. And she says at one point, you can actually use the book as a manual. So you can use it and read the first chapter on living spaces and then act on that. And then come back to the book once you've finished doing that and move on to the kitchen and read the chapter on the kitchen and then do your kitchen, and then read the chapter on the bedroom and then do your bedroom. So it works very easily to read it from cover to cover, but you could also read it much more slowly and work through it as you go. And I'm planning to do that later in the year when I have a few kind of blocks of time, go back to this book and actually read a whole chapter, think about the particular strategies for that particular space, and then put them into action in my house. And hopefully that'll make a difference too.
Yeah, cool. All right. Thanks for that one, Katrina.
You're welcome.
So I don't know if you guys heard this story. I thought this was really cute, and I thought it'd be a good one for us to discuss. There was this kid in Idaho. Have you heard about this? An 8-year-old. And
yeah.
he wrote a book. It was called The Adventures of Dylan Helbig's Christmas, spelt Christmas, really cute. And he spent 4 days writing and illustrating this book. And, it's a time slip book. He travels back in time after the star on the top of his Christmas tree explodes. And he wanted other kids to read his work, so he snuck it into the library. He added it into the fiction section. And when he went back to check on it, he was a bit upset because the book was gone. And it turns out the librarians loved it so much, they actually decided to add it to their official catalogue. It now has a wait list, and it is the most reserved book in this particular library. So he's already planning his next title, apparently.
Yeah, someone will snap him up, give him a book deal.
Yeah. Look, it reminded me of myself as a child, because this is the sort of thing I used to do all the time, is kind of write stories. Did you guys ever write a book as a kid, and what do you remember about it? How about you, Natasha?
I definitely, I wanted to be an author from when I was like 4 years old. So I remember distinctly in primary school that I wanted to write this novel, which I started. I never got beyond chapter 1. So we never got to the actual like adventure part, but it was a little bit like based on kind of Enid Blyton type adventure stories. I think it was called Mountain Moat. And it was about this island that these children were going to go to, which was like a kind of like a ring of mountains around a kind of like a lake in the middle. I'm hazy on what was actually going to happen on the island. I was going to deal with that when I got to it, and I never got to it. So
never mind. What about you, Katrina?
Yeah, I wrote a book. I think I was in year 4. And my school, the librarian at my school did this, I think it must have been an after-school club or something. And the idea of it was you write a picture book and actually make the book. And so she actually talked us through writing a story, planning it on different pages, doing the illustrations, actually putting it together and putting a cover on it. And I remember the process really clearly. I remember my book was called I Know a Koala Called Joe. I remember the pictures were terrible because I'm quite good at writing, but I'm terrible at drawing. And so like I can picture this tree that's just like a straight up and down two lines with this koala that's effectively like kind of two circles coloured in grey stuck to the side of the tree.
Hey, it sounds conceptual. Those could be cool illustrations.
They could be, but they weren't. But I remember it being really fun, and especially because, you know, you started the term with nothing, and by the end of the term I had this actual physical book that I had made and written and produced. I have no idea where it is. I suspect my mum has it, but her house is in boxes at the moment, so I thought I'd better not ask her if she knows where it is right now. But once they've finished moving, I'm totally going to ask her if she knows where it is, because I'd really love to see it again. I'm sure she's kept it.
This is the upside of not doing too much decluttering, is that I've discovered I have a couple of exercise books full of writing. So ones that's, I think some of them might be from school, but I also did make this little book, again, like I'd obviously read a lot of Enid Blyton, but it was called My Trip in a Pink Bubble. And it was about a giant bubble landing on the back lawn in the middle of the night. And then as the kid goes into it, this little door appears and she jumps in and she goes off on this journey. And
Sounds very James and the Giant Peach. Someone had been reading Roald Dahl.
possibly, yes. It would have been about year 4 or year 5 that I wrote this. So chances are I was reading Roald Dahl at that point in my life. And then there's some witch involved. And anyway, of course, it all ends up happily. What surprised me, though, actually, was that the pictures were actually quite good. So I must have traced them because, like you, Katrina, I have zero artistic skill. So I'm just guessing I completely traced them. Yeah.
Oh, cute.
So it was a lot of fun to look over it again. I'm thinking I might pull out some of these and read them to my kids for bedtime stories.
Absolutely.
That would be kind of fun. Anyway, I have been reading a book, Natasha, that just sounds almost exactly the same as like the book that you read. Well, it's pretty much covers the same ground. So I read a book called Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Peter Scezzaro. And actually it's a course as well. And like you said, there's a workbook.
Mm-hmm. Did you do the workbook?
I did some of it.
Well, you're ahead of me. I haven't done it yet.
But the thing I've actually liked more is they have a day-by-day study guide with it. It was like a little book with a little study each day, and I'm still doing that because you're supposed to do 2 a day, and that was never going to happen. I'm pretty proud that I'm doing 1 a day. But basically it's about spiritual practices. It's about the connection between a healthy emotional life and a healthy spiritual life. And in that, similar to the book that you read, Natasha, it uses silence, contemplation, and things like that. And I guess it's trying to correct a sort of a transactional attitude to prayer and spirituality. It is very much, though, embedded in that Christian worldview. I don't mean just a Christian worldview, and I'm not referring just to the faith, but I'm talking about the Christian culture in the US. So I think some parts of what the book is trying to address would be alien to you as an Australian. But particularly if you're an Australian who's not of any faith background, it is often addressing the pendulum that is swung in Christianity of busyness and doing everything. But what is great, and particularly with the day-by-day study guide, is that it's drawing on a lot of monastic writings and practices and returning to those, but it's also written for modern people today. I actually appreciate that little kind of day-by-day study a lot more than the actual book, because there's more to be gained by actually doing the contemplation than there is in reading about contemplation.
So does it talk about particular emotions?
Look, one of the sort of themes is the negative, like going back to your childhood, your family of origin, emotional pain that you may have from the past, addressing that, and also dealing with loss and disappointment in life. It calls it going through the wall. So basically, when we hit that point where we're sort of disappointed, things haven't worked out the way that we wanted them to, or we've had a major loss or trauma in our lives, and just looking at, how you can bring that into your spiritual life, address it, don't just let it fester. So I recommend it, but particularly I think I've liked the studies more than just reading it as a book.
So clearly we all need to, slow down and declutter our lives.
That's right. I think there's definitely been an unintended theme in this episode. So, yeah. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Katrina.
So in this episode, we've reviewed The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry by John Mark Comer, How to Stay Emotionally Healthy and Spiritually Alive in the Chaos of the Modern World, Decluttering at the Speed of Life by Dana K. White, and Emotionally Healthy Spirituality by Peter Scezzaro. Thanks for listening to the Hope Book Club. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and review us. And we hope you've enjoyed listening, because life is just better with a book.
Hope 1032. Thanks for listening.